The Great Hall of the Galactic Coalition was a masterpiece of light and sound, a vast orbital chamber where 100 species met to decide the fate of the stars. It was a place of soft chimes, shimmering holograms, and the low murmur of translated speech. In one of the central tiers, Ambassador High One of Earth sat, her hands folded neatly on the smooth desk before her. She wore a simple gray suit, a stark contrast to the brilliant silks, gleaming chitin, and iridescent scales that filled the room. Her face was calm, a placid pool giving away nothing of the depths beneath. Next to her, her aide, Ji-hoon, monitored a data slate, his expression equally neutral. They were both used to the subtle dismissals, the way conversations in the social galleries would pause when they entered and resume in hushed tones. Humanity had been a member of the coalition for 3 generations, and in all that time they had earned a reputation: quiet, patient, endlessly reasonable. Some called them peaceful. Others, like the Virax, called them weak. The Virax ambassador, a tall being with cobalt blue skin and rigid spines running down his back, was speaking now. His name was not important to High One. He was simply the latest voice of an ancient, arrogant chorus. The data is clear. The Virax ambassador's voice boomed through the universal translators. The world-designated K272E in the fringe sectors was a barren rock, of no use to any species. Our surveys confirmed it. The fact that humanity had listed it on a watch list of potential future interest is irrelevant. Our colonization is legal under Coalition Expansion Statutes 45B. High One watched him. She knew the truth. K2 to 72E was not barren. A deep core scan by a human probe 15 years ago had revealed a unique, slow-growing crystalline ecosystem in its mantle, a scientific treasure. Humanity had placed a protective claim on it, not to own it, but to study it. The Virax had ignored the claim, scanned only the surface, and planted their flag. Now, they were not only occupying the world, but were strip mining it, destroying the fragile inner life in the process. The claim, High One said, her voice clear and soft, yet carrying to every corner of the silent chamber, was filed and acknowledged. The subsurface biosphere reports were submitted to the Central Archive. The Virax expedition accessed that archive before their departure. The Virax ambassador waved a 3-fingered hand, a gesture of supreme dismissal. A filing error. A minor species' overzealous cataloging of rocks. It does not constitute a prior claim of substance. However, he continued, his eyes glinting, we are not without mercy. The Virax Consortium is willing to compensate humanity for their clerical disappointment. A small percentage of the mineral yields, perhaps. A ripple went through the chamber. It was an insult, wrapped in the thinnest possible veil of diplomacy. The offer was a pittance, and its framing suggested humanity was a petty bureaucrat, upset over a misplaced form. Got Ji-hoon's jaw tightened infinitesimally. On his data slate, a silent alert pulsed. Back on Earth, in the Global Situation Room, a dozen men and women watched the feed. Among them was Min-soo's superior, a woman named Yoon-ji. She didn't react either. They had known this was coming. High One did not look at the offer on her own screen. She looked directly at the Virax, then at the council chair, a mollusk-like Keldra whose gentle bioluminescence usually pulsed with calm wisdom. The record, High One said, each word precise and cool, will note our formal objection to the Virax interpretation of events and our rejection of their proposed compensation. She did not raise her voice. She did not slam her fist. She simply stated the fact and sat down. The Virax ambassador snorted, a dry, scraping sound. Noted. Let the record also show humanity's continued preference for words over action. An admirable, if quaint, trait. The session moved on to other matters. Trade disputes between insectoid hive clusters, navigation rights in a nebula. Humanity's moment was over, another minor note in a long, frustrating symphony. Later, in the private human embassy quarters, the air was still. Ji-hoon finally let out a long, slow breath. They didn't even debate it. Not a single species spoke in support. It was not their concern, HFY said, gazing out a viewport at the swirling nebula that served as the coalition's backdrop. And we did not expect them to. The lesson today was not for the Verax, Ji-hoon. It was for the others. We have shown once again that we will take the insult. We will absorb the blow. Their perception of our patience is the canvas on which we are painting. On Earth, the public reaction was a simmering pot. In cafes in Seoul, bars in Nairobi, communal hugs on the Martian plains, people watched the news summaries. There was anger, yes. A deep, old anger. Young Tae-min, a pilot in the Orbital Defense Corps, swore and threw his towel at a screen. How many times? When do we say enough? But the official channels, the voices of the government, were calm. They spoke of the long view, of peaceful resolution, of not stooping to the level of provocateurs. The message was discipline. Endure. Watch not far from the political theaters, on the dark, icy edge of the solar system. Min-soo listened to the broadcast in his cramped habitation pod on listening post Kappa 7. The signal was delayed, crackling with static. He heard HFY's calm voice, the Verax's sneer, the silence of the chamber. He didn't swear. He didn't get angry. He took a slow sip of cold coffee and turned back to his console. His screen was not showing news. It showed a complex, shimmering web of light. Each thread was a gravity signature, a comm laser path, an engine plume. It was a tiny piece of a map he had helped maintain for 10 years. It was called the Vigil. His sister, Ga, was on Mars, in a different kind of quiet room. Hers was a vast, climate-controlled archive, row upon row of data servers humming gently. Her work was not mapping starships, but mapping intentions. Every broken treaty, every diverted freighter, every sabotaged probe, every diplomatic slight since the day the first coalition scout ship had entered Pluto's orbit. She was not a warrior or a spy. She was a historian. Her weapon was context. She entered the latest event into the ledger. Asterisk Coalition Session 445.1. Verax claim on K272E. Objection recorded. Ignored. Precedent reinforced. Asterisk she linked the entry to 17 others. Verax encroachments on human survey zones. She linked it to 32 more. Coalition failures to enforce their own laws when humanity was the victim. The data point glowed, connected to a sprawling, ugly constellation of grievances. It was not a record for vengeance, she told herself. It was a diagnostic. A patient, endless study of a disease called disrespect. In the coalition halls. The other ambassadors returned to their routines. The human delegation, they noted, was as polite and unobtrusive as ever. HFY attended receptions, discussing stellar poetry with the Keldra. Ji-hoon worked on trade agreements, conceding minor points with a smile. The incident with the Verax was already fading, just another proof of a well-understood truth. Humanity was infinitely patient. Their limit, if it existed at all, was so far beyond the horizon as to be mythical. It was a comfortable truth for the galaxy. It allowed them to take without fear, to push without consequence. None of them saw the silent alert that traveled from Min-soo's post to Yoonji's station on Earth, and then to HFY's private, encrypted pad. It was a single line of text, a project status update 90 years in the making. Vigil network, synchronization complete, final phase active, awaiting directive. HFY read it in her quarters. The soft light of the nebula playing across her face. She allowed herself one small, private moment. She closed her eyes, thinking of the lost crystals of K272E, of every forgotten insult, of the simmering anger of people like Tae-min and the cold, dedicated watch of people like Min-soo and Jie. The ledger was full. The canvas was prepared. She deleted the message. The patience of humanity, that deep, quiet pool, remained perfectly undisturbed on the surface. But far below, in the unobserved depths, the first stone had been dropped. The ripples were beginning, too small for anyone else to see, but they were there. The watch was over. The waiting was almost done. The silence of listening post-Kappa 7 was not an empty silence. It was a dense, heavy thing, filled with the low hum of machines and the whisper of cosmic radiation against the hull. Min-soo floated before his main console, his fingers dancing across holographic keys. On his primary screen, a single, unremarkable dot of light pulsed. It was a Virax cargo hauler, designation VCS Longclaw, currently traversing a shipping lane in the Lyra sector, 5 light-years away. To anyone else, it was just a ship. To Min-soo and to the Vigil, it was a node in a vast, living web. His post was one of thousands, a silent sentinel made of rock and ice and human determination, scattered in the dark reaches beyond the orbits of planets. They didn't listen to communications. That was too obvious, too easy to detect. They listened to the universe's background chatter. They tracked the faint gravitational wrinkles of a ship's passage, the minuscule energy spikes of its power core cycling, the way its mass shadow bent the path of distant starlight. For decades, humanity had been building this map. Not a map of stars, but a map of habits. A soft chime sounded. A new thread connected to the Longclaw. A smaller dot, a Virax patrol frigate, had just docked with it, transferring something. The Vigil's predictive algorithms, trained on a century of observation, suggested it was a weapons resupply, a violation of the Demilitarized Zone Treaty near the Orion Sprawl. Min-soo tagged the event. It flowed into the network, adding another data point. Patient, unseen. This was the work. His personal comms. Channel blinked with an incoming message from Mars. It was his sister. GA. Her face appeared on a secondary screen, framed by the sterile glow of the archive lights behind her. "You saw the session?" she asked, her voice quiet. There was no video delay. The Vigil's proprietary quantum-linked comms were one of its few active technologies, a secret buried deep. "I heard it," Min-soo said, not looking away from his main display. High 1 was perfect. The ledger updated automatically. Pattern Sigma is now at 98% confidence. Pattern Sigma was their internal name for the Virax strategy of incremental, deniable aggression. It wasn't just about stealing worlds. It was about testing how much they could take before humanity finally made a sound louder than a polite objection. "It'll reach 100 soon," Min-soo murmured. "They're getting impatient. Their moves are less careful." GA was silent for a moment. The historical parallel is the Grib annexations, 1,200 years ago in the old coalition records. A species that kept absorbing losses until it had none left to give. Then it was removed from the roster. "We're not the Grib," Min-soo said, his voice flat. "We have the Vigil. The Vigil is a tool, a mirror. It shows them what they are, not what we will do." GA was the philosopher, the one who worried about the meaning of it all. Min-soo was the engineer. He just maintained the mirror. "The directive will come soon," he said. "I can feel it in the network traffic. The final synchronization checks are running across all posts. It's ready." On Mars, GA looked at her own screens, filled not with star maps, but with timelines and interconnected events. The ledger was more than a list of wrongs. It was a psychological profile of a galaxy. She saw how the Keldra valued harmony, but would always choose the path of least conflict, even if it was unjust. She saw how the insectoid hive clusters only respected demonstrated strength. She saw the Varak's contempt for any species that did not constantly proclaim its own power. And she saw humanity's entry, written by others, patient, docile, technologically competent, but non-innovative in military spheres. Risk-averse. They had written their own epitaph. And they didn't know it. The provocation, when it came, was not in the council chamber. It was near Jupiter. The CSS Curiosity, a human deep system research vessel, was cataloging the complex magnetic fields of the gas giant's poles. It was a ship of science, painted white, covered in sensors, its only weapons a meteoroid laser. Its crew of 40 included astronomers, physicists, and exobiologists. They were broadcasting their peaceful purpose on all standard channels. The Varak's patrol, the Fang of Triumph, dropped out of warp space too close, a deliberate show of force. Their commander, a young Varak's eager for glory, hailed the Curiosity. "You are operating in a zone of strategic interest. Alter your course immediately and submit to inspection for prohibited scanning technology." The Curiosity's captain, a man named Soong, replied with calm confusion. "Strategic interest? This is a sovereign human system. We are engaged in pure scientific study. Our permits are in order. Please identify the regulation we are violating." The answer was a warning plasma burst across the Curiosity's bow, close enough to scorch its sensor arrays. "Your permits are irrelevant. This is a Varak security matter. Heave to." Captain Soong, fearing for his crew, began a slow turn. But the Fang of Triumph's commander, interpreting the cautious movement as defiance, or perhaps simply seeing a chance for a trophy, gave a different order. A single focused kinetic railgun round, designed to punch through armor, lanced out. It was aimed at the engines, to disable. The Fang of Triumph's targeting was off. Or perhaps it wasn't. The round tore through the center of the Curiosity, shredding the habitation module. The ship didn't explode. It came apart in a terrible, silent blossom of metal, atmosphere, and bodies. The Fang of Triumph collected the debris field for analysis and warped away. News reached Earth in minutes. The silent alarm that pulsed through the Vigil network was different this time. It wasn't a data point. It was a cold red flash. Min Su saw it on his screen, not as an abstract event, but as the termination of 40 life sign transponders linked to the Vigil's passive trackers. He sat perfectly still in the humming dark of his post. The patient, watching silence around him, suddenly felt different. It felt like a held breath. On Mars, GA received the casualty list. She knew one of the exobiologists, a woman who had shared tea with her once, excited about the potential for prebiotic molecules in the Jovian atmosphere. GA did not cry. She opened the ledger. She created a new entry. It was not linked to other entries. It sat alone, a bright, burning star of data. CSS Curiosity. Destroyed. 40 souls. Varak's vessel Fang of Triumph. Unprovoked. Then she linked it. She linked it to every Varak's infringement, every sneer in the council, every stolen resource. The constellation of grievances now had a supernova at its heart. On Earth, in the global situation room buried deep beneath the Alps, the atmosphere was frigid. Yoon-ji stood before the Council of 12. The faces on her screens were the leaders of Earth, Mars, the Belt, and the few outsystem colonies. Ambassador Hai-1 was there too, her connection from the coalition station crystal clear. The Varaks had already sent a message. It was a masterpiece of offensive bureaucracy. Regrettable incident. Human vessel in restricted maneuver pattern. Tragic accident during a lawful inspection. Offer standard condolence payments. Yoon-ji did not read the message aloud. She simply displayed the vigil's record of the event, the perfect trajectory of the fang of triumph, the curiosity's clear stationary position, the unmistakable energy signature of the railgun charging, the kinetic impact, the debris field scan that showed the fang of triumph collecting human biological matter alongside wreckage. There was no debate, no angry shouting. The time for that had passed generations ago. High One spoke first, her calm voice now carrying the weight of glaciers. "The ledger," she said, looking at each leader in turn, "is full. We have absorbed their insults, their thefts, their arrogance. We have watched, and we have recorded. They have now taken lives, believing there would be no cost. The vigil is ready. It is time to show them the price of our patience." One by one, the leaders nodded. The vote was unanimous. It was not a vote for war. It was a vote for revelation. .eung input the final codes. Across the solar system, on every listening post, mining outpost, and orbital platform, a single, encrypted data packet was received, and unlocked. Min Su saw the command appear on his screen. It was one word: Vigil, final phase, execute withdrawal protocol. He had trained for this moment for 10 years. His hands moved, no longer just observing, but acting. He initiated the sequence. The listening post Kappa 7 began to power down its external sensors. It would go dark, becoming just another piece of ice. But before it did, it sent one last, powerful burst of data along the quantum network, contributing its final piece to the whole. The map was complete. The mirror was polished. In her archive, Jie saw the ledger lock. No new entries could be made. The diagnostic was over. The patient was terminal, and the doctors were putting away their charts. High One looked out her viewport at the gleaming spires of the Coalition station. She allowed herself one last moment of quiet. The patience was not gone. It had simply been a fuel, and now the tank was empty. The long, silent watch of humanity was over. The change began not with a bang, but with a series of silences. On the bustling trade hub of Waystation Palace, a human merchant named Jinsun was finalizing a deal for deuterium with a Keldra broker. His personal comms chimed with a priority alert, a tone he had only heard in drills. He glanced at the message, his friendly smile not faltering. He finished the sentence, shook the broker's smooth appendage, and said, "I must attend to a family matter. We will conclude tomorrow." He left his assistant to pack up their samples and walked, without haste, to the nearest starport. Within the hour, he was on a human-registered shuttle, its destination set for the nearest human outpost. He did not explain. He did not return. On the verdant agricultural world of Viridia Prime, a team of human terraformers, led by a woman named Su Min, were overseeing the repair of a crucial atmospheric processor for the native hive clusters. They were celebrated experts, the only ones who understood the delicate balance of Viridia's ecology. Their supervisor's wrist comp vibrated. Su Min looked at it, nodded, and called her team together. A mandatory recall. Emergency protocols. They handed their data slates and access codes to the bewildered hive cluster foreman, boarded their lander, and lifted off. The atmospheric processor, left at 60% functionality, began to emit a warning hum. In the glittering social halls of the Coalition Central Library, human cultural attaches, linguists, and historians were attending a gala. One by one, their discreet earpieces delivered the same message. They made polite excuses, citing sudden headaches or urgent messages from home. They left their drinks unfinished, their conversations dangling. Within minutes, the human section of the party was empty. A silent pocket in the crowd. Ambassador High One was the last to leave. She requested a brief, formal meeting with the council chair, the Keldra elder. She stood in its chambers, her posture as impeccable as ever. "A family emergency requires my immediate return to human space," she said, her voice carrying its usual calm warmth. "I have submitted my temporary leave of absence paperwork." The Keldra chair pulsed with gentle, confused light. "Ambassador, this is sudden. The situation with the Virax incident is unresolved. Your presence is a stabilizing force. Humanity believes in the Coalition's processes," High One replied, offering a slight, respectful bow. "I am sure wisdom will prevail in my absence. Goodbye." She turned and walked out, her heels making no sound on the organic floor. She did not look back at the chamber where she had absorbed so many insults. She boarded the last human diplomatic shuttle. As the airlock sealed, she let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 30 years. This was the Great Withdrawal. It happened across 1,000 worlds, in 100 sectors, within a single standard galactic day. Every human, every piece of human-operated equipment, began a quiet, orderly retreat towards the borders of human-controlled space. There were no protests, no angry speeches, no declarations. Just a profound, unsettling absence, like the sudden stopping of a constant, low-level hum you only notice when it's gone. The first major shock came 12 hours later. It was nicknamed the Silent Stop. A Virax luxury liner, the pride of Sean, was cruising through a well-traveled lane when its engines failed. Not an explosive failure, but a quiet power down. Lights, gravity, life support all switched to emergency backups. The captain scrambled, but his engineers were baffled. The ship's FTL drive, a human-made smooth space model renowned for its reliability and efficiency, was completely dead. It would not respond to any commands. It simply stopped. Then another ship reported the same issue. Then a Keldra medical frigate. Then 3 Hive cluster freighters. Any vessel using a human-made or human-maintained FTL drive found itself stranded in the void if it was outside human space. The drives weren't damaged. They were locked. A remote, universal kill code, buried deep in the proprietary software every species had licensed and depended on for generations, had been activated. Panic, slow and cold, began to seep through the Coalition. Communications were next. The Galactic Data Stream, a network of subspace relays that allowed real-time communication across vast distances, experienced a series of cascading failures. 70% of its core routing hardware was of human design. It didn't crash. It began to reroute all non-human traffic into slow, clogged secondary paths. Diplomatic channels slowed to a crawl. Trade deals froze. News of the crisis itself could barely travel. On the Virax homeworld, the High Command was furious, not yet fearful. A tantrum. A coward sabotage. The Virax Admiral roared. "They think to inconvenience us? We will roll our fleets to their border and break their toys. Our own engineers will bypass their childish locks." But the engineers couldn't. The systems were black boxes, perfectly crafted and sealed. To tear them apart was to destroy them. The Virax had not built a major warship FTL drive in 80 years. It had been cheaper and better to buy them from humanity. Then the Keldra made a quiet, terrifying discovery. They accessed the central archives for the cure to the Rayon plague, a blight that affected their primary food source. The cure's formula, the result of a joint Keldra-human bioengineering project, was gone. Not deleted, but locked behind a human encryption wall. The same was true for the navigational charts of the Hyperion Maze, a nebula only human scout ships had fully mapped. The same was true for the medical databases on 100 cross-species compatible therapies. Humanity hadn't just taken their people and their engines. They had taken their knowledge. The shared, benevolent knowledge they had poured into the Coalition for generations, asking for little in return, was revealed not to be a gift, but a deposit. And humanity had just called in the loan. The Coalition Council convened in a state of emergency. The chamber was a mess of flickering holograms as the failing data stream struggled to maintain connections. The Verax ambassador was screaming about an act of war. The Hive cluster representatives clicked in agitated distress. The Keldra chair pulsed with a slow, anxious rhythm. "Where is Ambassador High One?" The Keldra asked, its translated voice for the first time sounding strained. "Gone," a junior human aide said from the now empty human delegation desk. He was the only one left, a young man named Ta Min, tasked with being the last voice. "All human personnel have been recalled. Per Coalition Charter, subsection 12, regarding the voluntary withdrawal of a member species representation, I am here to formally close the embassy." He held up a data rod. "All physical assets are accounted for. The keys are here. This is an outrage." The Verax ambassador bellowed. "You cannot do this. You are a minor species. You will be punished." Tae Min, who had once thrown a towel at a screen in frustration, now looked at the Verax with an empty, calm expression. It was the same look Min Su had in his listening post. The look of someone who had seen the ledger. "The message from the Human Governance Council is as follows," he said, reading from his slate. "The period of cooperation has concluded. Humanity is now engaged in a period of strategic reassessment. All shared technologies and databases are temporarily suspended pending review. We wish you no harm. Please do not approach human space." He placed the data rod on the desk, turned and walked to the exit. "Stop him." The Verax commanded, but the Keldra chair extended a tendril of light. "Let him go. The violence has already been done. It is a violence of absence." The chamber fell into a chaotic uproar as Tae Min left. On the streets outside the orbital station, rumors were becoming terror. Ships were stranded. Medicines were unavailable. Trade had collapsed. The galaxy was grinding to a halt, and the only species that knew how to fix it had quietly closed a door and turned off the lights on their way out. In her private cabin on the diplomatic shuttle, High One watched the Coalition station shrink to a speck on the viewport. Ji-hoon handed her a cup of tea. "The withdrawal is 98% complete," he reported. "The Vigil network confirms widespread systemic disruption. Their confusion is total." High One took the tea. She thought of the curiosity, of the 40 lives that had been the final drop in a bottomless cup. "They believed our patience was infinite because they could not see its edges," she said softly. "Now they are adrift in the dark we left behind. Soon they will look for a light, and the only one left will be ours." She sipped her tea as the stars stretched into the lines of warp space, heading home. The silent war was over. The lesson was about to begin. Chaos is loud. Panic is loud. The void, however, is silent. For 2 standard weeks, the galaxy had been drowning in noise, the frantic chatter of stranded fleets, the angry demands of leaders, the desperate pleas from failing systems. Then a new silence descended. The human embassy channels, which had emitted only static, opened with a simple, clear band transmission to the vessels of the so-called Coalition Enforcement Fleet currently approaching the Sol system boundary. "This is Ambassador High One. You will stop at the coordinates now being transmitted. You will power down all weapon systems. You will await a single emissary vessel. Any deviation will be met with permanent disablement." The message repeated, calm and firm on every frequency. It was the first human voice the galaxy had heard since the Great Withdrawal. The Coalition Enforcement Fleet was a ragged, angry thing. It was led by the Verax, who had strong-armed and shamed a dozen other species into contributing ships. They were not all battle cruisers. Many were logistical ships, science vessels, and armed freighters. Their morale was low, their crews confused and fearful of their own failing technology. The Varak's commander, Admiral Crox, saw the human message as a final bluff. They cower behind their tricks. They see our might, and now they want to talk? We will talk with our primary cannons. All ships advance to the edge of their sensor range and assume attack formations. His orders were met with hesitation from the other species captains, but the Varak ships pushed forward. As they crossed the invisible boundary of the transmitted coordinates, it happened. Not an explosion. Not a weapon. A complete, localized power failure. Every Varak ship in the vanguard went dark. Engines died. Weapon systems went offline. Life support flickered to battery-powered minimal levels. On the bridge of the Varak's flagship, Admiral Crox was thrown into darkness, the only light coming from the distant stars and the horrified glow of emergency panels. "What is this?" he roared. "Engineering." "Report! All systems are non-responsive, Admiral." It's as if the ship's own computer is refusing our commands. The core is locked. The non-Varak ships, hanging back, watched in terrified silence. They saw the Varak's vanguard become a dark, drifting shoal of metal. Then, from the inner system, a small, sleek vessel emerged. It was unarmed, painted a simple white with blue accents. It moved slowly, deliberately, passing the dead Varak ships without a glance, heading straight for the heart of the still functional part of the fleet. It stopped, hanging in the void. Its airlock cycled open. A small human shuttle emerged. It flew not to the flagship, but to the largest Keldra vessel, the Tide of Clarity. It requested, and was granted, docking permission. High One stepped onto the Keldra ship. She wore a plain gray suit. She was accompanied only by Ji-hoon, who carried a simple data slate. They were taken to the command chamber, where the captains of the surviving fleet had gathered via flickering hologram, their faces etched with fear and confusion. The Varak's Admiral Crox's image was a static-laced picture of rage from his dead ship. High One did not sit. She stood in the center of the chamber, a small figure in a room of towering aliens and shimmering holograms. "You were told to wait," she said, her voice echoing in the translator. "You did not. The Varak ships have been pacified. They will remain so until we choose otherwise." She looked at the image of Admiral Crox. "Your railgun targeting system on the Fang of Triumph had a 14% calibration error. That is why your shot killed 40 scientists instead of disabling a ship. We know this because we monitor all gravitational lensing in our sovereign space. We have known the error in your targeting AI for 7 years." The Admiral's furious sputtering was cut off as High One turned to the Keldra captain. "Captain, your homeworld's primary power grid, the geothermal taps of your southern continent, has a latent instability in its pressure regulation system. If not corrected, it will fail in approximately 6 months. The correction sequence is 17 pages long. It is stored in a database you no longer have access to." She turned to the Hive Cluster representative. "Your species' queen ship, the Eternal Mother, is currently on a migration path that will take it through a dense micrometeoroid field in the Cygnus sector in 11 days. The safe path, a 3-degree course adjustment, was calculated by our scout drones 5 years ago. That navigational data is also now unavailable to you." One by one, she addressed a representative of each species present. She did not reveal military secrets. She revealed vulnerabilities. She told the aquatic Selk of the coming salinity shift in their breeding atolls. She told the avian Ricker of the subtle star drift error in their sacred navigation constellations. Each fact was a small, private terror, something they believed only they knew, or a coming disaster they had not yet seen. The chamber was now utterly silent. The fear of technological loss replaced by a deeper, more personal dread. You have believed, High One continued, her voice still quiet, that our patience was weakness, that our silence was stupidity. You were wrong. For every insult you gave, we recorded a fact. For every world you stole, we mapped a fault line. For every life you took. She paused, and the air grew colder. We identified a vulnerability. We did not build weapons to point at your worlds. We simply looked, and we remembered. We built the vigil, and the vigil is a mirror. It shows you exactly what you are, fragile. Admiral Crox found his voice, a strangled shout over the failing comms. This is blackmail, terrorism. We will unite and crush you for this. High One finally looked at his flickering image with something like pity. Admiral Crox of the Varax, your secret personal retreat, the asteroid you call Krax's Pride, has a life support system that is fed by a single, unshielded conduit from the main reactor. Its location is at these coordinates. Ji-hoon tapped his slate. A set of numbers appeared on every screen. The security code for its main airlock is 7 Gamma 2 Charlie. Your youngest brood is there currently, yes? For their safety. The Admiral's image froze. The rage drained from his face, replaced by a look of pure, helpless horror. We do not wish to harm them, High One said, her voice softening only a fraction. We do not wish to harm anyone. We never have. But you have confused our wish for peace with an inability to act. You mistook our patience for a lack of limit. She took a step forward, addressing them all. This fleet will turn around. The Virax ships will be released once you are outside our border. The locked technologies will remain locked. The shared knowledge will remain withdrawn. This is not a negotiation. It is a demonstration. She held up a single hand. You have 5 minutes to begin your collective withdrawal. If you do not, we will not fire a single shot. We will simply send the security code for Admiral Crox's retreat and the location of every other hidden sanctuary we have catalogued for your leaders to the public channels of your worlds. We will let your own people, your rivals, your enemies, decide what to do with the knowledge of how fragile your power truly is. She turned and walked towards the airlock, Ji-hoon following. She stopped at the door and looked back. The moment you tested our patience, you lost. The moment you forgot that to be patient is not to be blind, you doomed yourselves. No species will ever forget this moment. Remember it. And leave. The shuttle departed. The white emissary ship turned and glided back towards the inner system. On the tide of clarity, there was no discussion, no vote. The Keldra captain, its bioluminescence pulsing with a stunned, rhythmic dread, gave the order. All ships reverse course immediately. One by one, the still functional ships turned. They moved slowly at first, then with increasing speed, desperate to get away from the terrible, quiet knowledge that hung in the void behind them. They left the dark Varax ships drifting. 10 minutes later, as the fleet retreated, the Varax ships hummed back to life, their systems restored as mysteriously as they had been taken. They too turned and fled, their admiral silent and broken in his chair. Humanity had not won a battle. They had not fired a single shot. They had simply held up a mirror, and the sight of their own reflection had shattered the galaxy's nerve. The lesson was taught not in fire and noise, but in cold, silent, undeniable truth. The Galactic Coalition did not dissolve. Instead, it entered a long, quiet winter. Its chambers remained. Its procedures were still followed, but the heart had gone out of it. The memory of the human demonstration, which they called the Day of the Mirror, hung over every debate and trade discussion like a ghost. It was not aggression they feared. It was the profound, unsettling understanding of their own transparency. Humanity did not return to its old seat. For a standard year, There was only silence from human space. The locked technologies remained locked. The shared data remained behind its encryption walls. The galaxy learned to limp, to find workarounds, to live in a slower, dimmer reality. The Virax, their arrogance burned away by the exposure of their secrets, turned inward, their political structure consumed by internal scandal and rage. The other species moved with a new caution, eyeing each other, wondering what humanity might have seen and recorded about them. Then an invitation came, not to the coalition chambers, but to a new, neutral station built in the buffer zone between human space and the rest of the galaxy. It was called the Forum of Clarity. The invitation was extended only to the Keldra, the hive clusters, and a few other species who had shown restraint during the crisis. The Virax were pointedly not invited. Ambassador Hai-1 met them there. She looked the same, her calm unbroken. With her were Ji-Hoon, and notably G.A. the historian. The room was simple, with a large window looking out onto a tranquil nebula. "We have watched your adjustment period," Hai-1 began. "The vigil has remained active. We saw your struggles. We also saw that no retaliatory fleets were assembled. That counts for something." The Keldra representative pulsed slowly. "You showed us our fragility. It was a humbling lesson. What is your purpose now? To rule from the shadows?" Hai-1 shook her head. She gestured to G.A. "Our purpose is to explain. For too long, you saw our patience as an empty thing. My colleague will show you it was not." G.A. activated a hologram. It showed the ledger. Not the data, but the scale of it a sprawling, intricate galaxy of interconnected points of light. "This is a map of your actions," G.A. said softly. "Every broken agreement, every stolen resource, every diplomatic slight. It is not a map of vengeance. It is a map of patterns. We studied you, not to conquer you, but to understand when the pattern would become a threat to our survival. The destruction of the curiosity was that point." She zoomed in on one strand, a series of events involving the Keldra. "You, for example, valued harmony. But your pattern showed you would always sacrifice a smaller species' justice to maintain peace with a larger, more aggressive one. You were not malicious. You were predictable. We needed to change the prediction." The hive cluster representative clicked. "By becoming the most aggressive species?" "No," Hai-1 said. "By becoming the most visible species. We did not hide our strength. We revealed yours. There is a difference. Power used to dominate is finite. It creates resistance. Power used to reveal creates reflection." The talks that followed were not negotiations in the old sense. There were no concessions haggled over. Humanity presented a new framework. They would slowly restore access to the vital technologies and databases, the medical cures, the navigational charts for safe travel, the core environmental supports. They would not, however, give away the proprietary secrets. The FTL drives would be provided as sealed units maintained by human engineers. The data stream would be restored, but its core would remain under human oversight. In return, humanity asked for only one thing: a permanent seat on a newly formed Coalition Security Council, with a veto power on any action involving military force or the annexation of territory. Not control over trade or culture or science. Just a veto on violence. "You called us passive," Hai-1 said. "Our veto is not passive. It is active restraint. It is the promise that we will not stand by and let another curiosity happen to anyone. Our patience is now your safeguard, but it is a patience backed by perfect sight." It was a bitter pill, wrapped in the gentle fabric of Hai-1's words. But after the alternative, the chilling silence and helplessness of the withdrawal, it was a pill the galaxy could swallow. The agreement was signed. It was called the Vigil Accords. Years passed. The galaxy rebuilt differently. Wars of aggression ceased. Conflicts were solved with tense, wary diplomacy, under the unspoken knowledge that the Vigil was watching, that any hidden move would be seen. Humanity did not flaunt its position. It used its veto only 3 times in the first decade, each time to stop a Verix-backed police action. Each time, they simply published the hidden motives and secret troop deployments they had observed. The actions collapsed from within. On the homeworld, life changed less. Minsu left his listening post. He now taught astrophysics. His students learned about gravity and stars, not about silent tracking. GA opened her archives, not the secret ledger, but a public museum of galactic history, emphasizing the patterns of cooperation that had worked, and the patterns of coercion that had failed. Elderly now, GA often walked in the gardens of the Forum of Clarity. One day, a young Keldra apprentice historian approached her, its light flickering with curiosity. "Historian GA," it asked, its translated voice soft. "My teachers say the day of the mirror saved the galaxy from a great war. But your people had the power to rule everything. Why did you not take it? Why choose this restrained path?" GA smiled, watching a fountain sparkle in the starlight. "Because the moment our patience ran out was not the moment we wanted to become tyrants. It was the moment we wanted the bullying to stop. There is a deep strength in knowing you can crush your enemy and choosing instead to make them see themselves. To make them so aware of their own weaknesses that they choose to be better." She pointed to a monument in the center of the garden. It was not a statue of a warrior or a ship. It was a simple, polished obsidian disc, reflecting everything around it. At its base was a chronometer, frozen at the exact moment High One had finished speaking to the fleet. "That is our legacy," GA said. "Not an empire, a mirror, and a reminder. True power is not in making others fear you. It is in making them see, truly see, the cost of their own actions. No species will ever forget that lesson again. And because of that, they will think twice or 3 times before they ever try to test the patience of anyone else. We didn't just make peace for ourselves. We made introspection a survival trait." The apprentice looked at the mirror monument, seeing its own delicate, glowing form reflected in the dark stone. It understood. The fear had faded, replaced by a profound, enduring respect, laced with a careful awe. Humanity was not the galaxy's master. They were its memory, its conscience, and its unwavering reflection. And in a universe that had almost forgotten how to look at itself, that was the most powerful thing of all.